diameter. Silver in Tokyo turns to gold in Paris.
You've gone away, had children, and you've come back and you've conquered the world.
Wow.
Yes, our Olympic supermums celebrated at the highest level.
Brooke Francis and Lucy Spores.
And this is a fantastic scull for Emma Twigg. She had all those medical problems in the winter, disrupted her training. But the New Zealand mum, her partner Charlotte, their son Tommy board in 2022, watching this race.
The results that our team have got are amazing mums. I don't think I've ever been as proud or emotional in my life. Thursday was a big day seeing those girls cross the line first.
The British silver medal shooter holding her 3-month-old baby.
Everyone's just really chipped in to really encourage me and tell me that although I've just had a baby, that the Olympic dream hasn't been forgotten about.
The Egyptian fencer surprises all with her revelation.
Nada Hafez, at 26, achieved the incredible at the 2024 Paris Olympics. She was 7 months pregnant. In a touching Instagram post, she announced she was carrying her little Olympian during the competition.
I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Today on The Detail, what it takes to have a baby and top the world at sport, and the ongoing battle to do both.
These big squads where things were quite rigid in terms of what you needed to do to train and the etiquette. It's been a complete revolution, which has been so refreshing to see.
More soon from multiple Olympian rower and commentator Martin Cross. But let's hear from sports journalist Suzanne McFadden.
Yeah, there's been a real shift in culture around mums competing in sport at the very top level. We're finally accepting that a woman at her athletic peak is also at her fertility peak. In the past, women have had to make the decision, do I have children and stop competing, or do I keep competing and then try and have children afterwards? And, you know, that doesn't always happen because they're coming to the end of their fertility cycles. So, yes, there's been much more acceptance, but, you know, that hasn't happened because sports have just woken up one day and said, hey, we need to get more women coming back after having children. It's been pushed by the athletes themselves.
It has. Okay. Well, we'll go more into that. But shall we focus first on what went on there at Rowing New Zealand to make them more accepting or encouraging of motherhood, I suppose?
Brooke Francis and Lucy Spores, who of course won gold in the women's double sculls, they kind of pushed that through. They decided that, hey, want to have a child but also want to keep rowing. So they went to Rowing New Zealand and said, will you support us? Fortunately, Rowing New Zealand said, yes, we will support you. This is the first time that it's happened in the sport at the very top level. It is, yeah. So they were the very first female athletes to be supported in this way. And when we talk about support, it's like through their pregnancy and out the other end, I guess. You know, what happens when they're coming back into the sport. So they made sure that the women had access to pelvic floor experts and that they had childcare organised so that they could get out on the water and train. But it's also about a sport like rowing being more flexible, you know, making sure that like if the women can't be there at 6 a.m. on this day, well, maybe we'll make their training 7. I've been really impressed with the way that Rowing New Zealand have, I guess, jumped on board here to help. But they're not the first sport, so there's, you know, a lot of other sports have already done this. But yeah, it's about them being, the athletes have had to be proactive and the sport's more flexible.
The general manager of Rowing High Performance, Rowing NZ's High Performance team, said we had to change our stripes
a little bit. We've probably been known to be quite fixed and rigid, but we've been the last 2 years very agile. We've had, like you say, the mums coming back from maternity leave. We've had athletes joining us from the US scholarship system coming in last year. and new developing athletes coming in with their number of retirements post-Tokyo.
It was part of a much bigger program, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
But going back to pelvic floors, it was so interesting that was specifically they had pelvic floor specialists helping them.
Yeah, it's a really big thing for female athletes. It's important that they don't rush back into sport immediately after they've had their children, because their bodies have changed. Hormones, just the whole effort of getting a baby out, whether it's come out the sunroof, as Dame Val Adams used to say, or the other way. But pelvic floor is a really important one to get right, because if you don't have that back to normal, it can cause all kinds of problems for elite athletes, because they're really needing to push their bodies again. And there's so much that can go wrong when you come straight out of having a baby and going back into being really focused on becoming an elite athlete again, which is what, a lot of them want to do now.
I mean, is there research on this that even says what really does go on with a woman's body, and, what stages should they be at before they get right into that high-level training?
Yeah, there is some research, but there's still not enough. And a lot of athletes are saying, there's no guidebook here for us to follow. And if our sport isn't completely on board with us or not willing to support us in this early stages of our return, what do we do? Who do we look to? And a really great example of that is the former Black Ferns captain, Les Elder. So she kind of went into this pregnancy blind, and she was expecting that, there'd be all these people to help her during her pregnancy. How long could she keep training? How long was it safe? What can I do in the gym? There was nothing. So she kind of had to find out herself. And then when other athletes around the world started hearing that she'd developed her own kind of program for herself that she'd written in a diary, they started asking her, could you send us your diary? Can we use it? Of course, every woman is different, but she realised that there was, a huge need for this. So she's actually set up a fitness group for mums, sporting mums, called Bump and Beyond, which is a great name. And it's for not only women who are pregnant or women who are postnatal, but women who want to get pregnant. So, she had a lot of trouble with her fertility and had to go through IVF to have her 2 children. So she's seen, though, that, there have to be specific gym fitness plans. Diet is really important. But, she wasn't getting this from her own sport, so she had to do it herself.
Look at that hug. That is so beautiful. So beautiful. Gold and silver.
Commentator Martin Cross was a member of the GB rowing team for 18 years. His book, Olympic Obsession, includes a chapter on the Kiwi rowers. Here he's talking about Caroline Florijn of the Netherlands and our own Emma Twigg just after their race.
The respect, the fondness, the love between those 2 athletes.
He's seen big changes to rowing worldwide up close.
It's much more friendly now and understanding.
And what difference does it make, or has it made, to the actual racing?
In terms of being a mum?
Yeah. Or has it made any difference?
I think there is some evidence that after pregnancy, your physiology might have slight improvements. But I think psychologically, if you take a look at what the Kiwi women's double, Brooke and Lucy, were saying, they've relished their training time more together than they ever had.
I love rowing the double with Lucy. I think it's special that we are both mums and know what each other is going through more than anyone else possibly here, which I think only strengthens us as a combination.
So it now becomes me time, and then obviously when they're mums and they're back with their family, that's what they're doing. But it does mean, in terms of training, that they're perhaps more in the moment, more enjoying their time in the boat, and that could give a performance advantage. So I think that's been significant.
And it's being celebrated now, you know, when you talk about it in your commentary, it's such a positive thing. But I just wonder, has it always been that way? You know, what's been the reaction in those early days?
Well, you know, I remember it was really frowned on, for example, that you would have partners. I mean, the guy I rode with, won Olympic gold with, Andy Holmes, in the late 80s, he brought his then wife, Pam, along once to training camp. But this was something that was, you know, kind of unheard of in the team. And also, to be quite honest, if a woman had had a child, then, you know, the chances were that it wouldn't be known about in the wider world so much. I think what has changed now, and for example, I think World Rowing made a little feature film, which you can watch on their website, celebrating the fact that there are mothers in the sport, like Phoebe Eriksson, one of our Israeli Paralympic rowers who'll be in the games. She's a mum as well. Donata Karoline. I mean, Donata's a fascinating one, the Lithuanian, because she had twins, and there was an issue during the birth of one of them. You know, he's okay, but he's got a kind of handicap, and she was depressed after the birth, and some friends said, you know, come back to rowing. So she was here competing in the Olympics. Unfortunately, she didn't make the final, but again, Lithuania supports women, and the stories are now known and they're actually being celebrated. And I think that indicates a more wide change in society and society's outlook, and what it regards as, particularly in sport, what it regards as now completely acceptable and normal, whereas that wasn't the case 10, 15, 20 years ago.
It must make your job quite different too, because, you know, you seem to know quite a bit about these competitors. You were talking about the children's names and that Emma Twigg and Lucy Spores are best friends.
She's such a great support for the New Zealand team. Came down to the lake to watch her best buddy Lucy Spores win gold in the women's double.
So you obviously take it quite a personal interest in the individual competitors.
Yeah, I mean, I love my sport, and it's a huge privilege to be able to talk to people throughout the world about a sport I love.
Gosh, what is it about rowing? It's a real obsessive sport, and New Zealand is really good at it.
You know, that's fascinating. It's got a long history in New Zealand, you know, from professional times where people used to race their boats out, you know, to the ship, and the first one would get the job of piloting the ship or the boat into harbour. And then I think, particularly with New Zealand, things came alive in the Munich Olympics in '72, and it was such an iconic moment when the Kiwis won that gold medal, and that really, you know, I think set a nation's expectations for what would happen to New Zealand. They have struggled on occasions, but I think, you know, particularly when you had the Evers Swindell twins, who won double golds in 2004 and 2008. It was fantastic. They inspired many women to take up the sport, like, you know, Kerry Williams or Grace Prendergast. So it wasn't just the men, the women came through, and they've got a fantastic system. It's fairly centralised, to be fair, but also I think they've been more flexible. A lot of New Zealand youngsters or Aussie youngsters, for example, go off and get scholarships to American universities now, like Yale or Harvard. And the New Zealand team used to say, well, if you're doing that, you haven't got a chance to be in the Kiwi team. But they're now much more flexible, so attitudes have changed. And I do see this New Zealand team as being far more flexible. I think, famously, I believe it was 2015, Emma Twigg was doing an IOC scholarship and she was training in Europe but she wasn't in New Zealand. So the New Zealand team said, well, you can't represent New Zealand, which in my personal view was crazy. So somebody else had to qualify the single for the 2016 Olympics. But I think the New Zealand team now is far more flexible. And I think we're seeing the results in terms of performance.
Now, you'd think that a female-dominated sport like netball would lead the way in supporting mums. Think again.
It wasn't until Dame Noeline Taurua became Silver Ferns coach, and she insisted that Netball New Zealand embrace mums at the top of the sport. So the captain, Amelia Ann Ekanasio, when she had her second child, she was invited to every Silver Ferns camp during her pregnancy and after. Even if she couldn't be involved physically, she was still felt that she was part of the team. She was still being paid to be part of the team. She was still part of that whole culture. And so netball is only just really coming into that, realisation as well.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because that's a woman's sport.
Yeah.
I was reading a little bit more about Amelia Ann, and in an interview in 2018, she said that Netball NZ didn't make it easy, and that she was actually out there training again 2 weeks after the birth of her baby, but it did seem like she was on her own quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think she found afterwards that, she came back too early and she struggled to get back to the top of the sport, and she spent a lot of time on the sidelines.
So really in a short period of time things have changed.
Yes, but when you think about it, it's been a long time coming. Camille French, who's going to run the marathon at these Olympics, she was running a couple of weeks after she'd had her daughter Sienna. At 4 months she ran the Auckland Half Marathon, which is just crazy. But she said nobody was telling her what to do, and she just felt like she had this hole in her abdomen where her abs used to be, and that she thought her stomach was going to fall out.
Really?
Yeah, because the muscles hadn't come back together properly.
This was after the baby was born?
Yes.
And then you think about, okay, what about when they're breastfeeding? Because those of us who are not super athletes, all your energy goes into feeding that baby.
Yeah.
So
grabbing sleep when you can.
Yeah. So how do they manage that even? And what's going on with the body? They must have to be quite careful in that during that time as well.
Yeah, there's studies have shown that in that time immediately after childbirth, your bone mineral density is reduced because they're taking calcium out of your bones to make breast milk. And so that can lead to stress fractures if you're not careful. There's anemia to consider. There's the ligaments change in your body with the hormones, and they're a lot looser. And so you'll do something and not realise that you've probably injured yourself. And of course then there's the lack of sleep. So that's really where the support of sports organisation needs to come in if they know that this athlete wants to continue at the level that they were.
So are the sports organisations doing that? Clearly Rowing New Zealand is doing it, and it sounds like Rugby NZ.
Yes, so New Zealand Rugby has changed its policy, I guess, around maternity. And Chelsea Semple, a former Black Fern, she was the first full-time contracted rugby player to fall pregnant. So she has lobbied for better maternity care. They listened. They covered her through her pregnancy, allowances to bring babies to camps and on tour, and bring a support person with you. They will cover that. Things have really moved forward. I mean, I just think back to Honey Hirame Smiler. when she had her son, she was back playing at the National Rugby League Championships 2 weeks after he was born. And because there was nobody to say, hey, honey, I don't think you should be doing this. But, you know, that's just what women in sport traditionally have done. They've made the rules themselves. They've just gone out there and done it.
How do other countries approach it? What is the attitude of other countries? Or can we imagine that New Zealand is leading the way in this area?
I think that we're probably on par with most developed countries in the world. Really interesting that the Olympic Village, this time for the first time, has a nursery. Huh. It's for mothers who are competing at the games can go to this nursery within the village and breastfeed their babies or just spend time with their children. The children have to be in nappies, so that's the limit. It's not a daycare centre. You can't just drop off your kid there and go and run 100 metres and then come back and pick them up.
As you would.
Yes. It's great. And that was at the insistence of Alison Felix, who is an 11-time Olympic medalist. She really wanted to have this place where mums could feel relaxed and comfortable and connected to their children again, because so many female athletes who are mums and then gone back to competition say, you know, I went to the Olympics and I didn't see my child for 6 weeks, and that had a huge mental effect.
Why haven't, the people who make the decisions, why haven't they acted sooner on this?
No idea. There's still a lot of work to do. A lot of mum athletes are saying, this is fantastic, let's make the nursery a regular fixture at Olympics, but also let's have spaces at every venue where you can go and use a breast pump and know that there's somewhere where you can safely store your milk until you return to the village. Let's make it as simple and as comfortable and as supporting as we can to have more mothers returning to sport. A lot of mums now talk about the woman who inspired them, Dame Valerie Adams, who, when she won her bronze medal in Tokyo, held up a photo of her 2 children and said, this is who I did this for. And this bronze medal means as much to me as a gold medal because I did it for my children. There are these trailblazers that women today look up to. And this is going to be fantastic for the future of rowing New Zealand. You now have these 3 women who have won Olympic medals as mums. And there will be all these young women out there going, okay, I might want to start a family early, but it doesn't mean it's the end of my career.
Yeah.
It could be just the start.
I don't think I've ever been as proud or emotional in my life. Thursday was a big day seeing those girls cross the line first, and I guess that's the beauty of sport and having such a big goal and having people around you and just working towards it. So if you've got big aspirations, then by all means.
That's Emma Twigg ending today's podcast. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by William Saunders and produced by Alexia Russell. Thanks to Martin Cross and Suzanne McFadden. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite anō.